Welcome to Porch Stories. I'm sitting on the porch of the Holmes cottage, and today I will be interviewing Linda Holmes Newton and Johanne Holmes Greer. Both are lifelong summer residents of Highland Beach and Venice Beach. Linda lives in Rhode Island and summers in Highland Beach, and Johanne lives in Annapolis and summers in Venice Beach. Well, ladies, let's get started. Johanne, when did you and your family first come to Highland Beach, Venice Beach? And tell us about what influenced you and your family to have a home here.
My grandparents bought in 1925, so my father grew up here as well as my sister and I. My parents bought another house in Venice Beach in 1974 because he wanted a place to keep his boats.
Yeah.
And having their own waterfront home was a dream come true. So I own the Venice Beach property now, and I'm in the process of renovating it so that it can be my year-round house. And I did find the plans because my father was going to renovate the house a little bit more, and before he got sick, and I found the plans, and I've tried to incorporate some of his plans into my plans.
Oh, very good.
So just keeping the spirit going.
Okay, Linda, you live in one of the original cottages of Highland Beach. Tell us about your house and how it has changed over the years.
Well, we've tried to maintain the original cottage as much as possible. We know the house was built around 1920, and our family, as Johanne said, took ownership in 1925. And each generation over the years has made improvements, and I think my husband Charles and I have been making the most recent improvements. But in it, we've always tried to maintain the original cottage and the feel of the original cottage. So that's where we are.
Very good. All right, Linda, another question. Do you remember when your grandfather was at the beach? Can you tell us a little bit about him and why he wanted to own a beach house in this community?
Yeah, well, his name was Tally Robert Holmes, and he was a Washingtonian, a native Washingtonian that was a businessman. And I remember him as a kid. I would be on the beach and he would come down after he commuted from DC and came here, and every day he swam laps across the beach front. Didn't matter how many jellyfish were out there. I was always amazed. He would be out there swimming laps. But in thinking about him as a man, he was pretty remarkable. He was an interpreter in World War I, and he also spoke German, French. He taught Latin and mathematics at what is now Dunbar High School. He was a founder of the Industrial National Bank, one of the board members of the Industrial National Bank, and he was also the owner of the Whitelaw Hotel, which was the largest hotel that was available to African Americans back in those days. But he was probably most noted for being one of the founders of the American Tennis Association. He was a 1910 graduate of Dartmouth College, and they didn't allow him to play tennis, even though he was one of the best in the country. And so he founded the American Tennis Association and was its first national champion. And I actually have one of his trophies that we keep here at the beach in the kitchen. And every year I get together with the grandchildren and we polish it up. But this was from his doubles championship in 1919, and
it looks brand new.
We polish it every summer. It's part of our family traditions here. But he was quite a remarkable man, and I think was looking for a place to relax and get away from the enormous pressures of that day and time.
Thank you. Johanne, tell us about your grandmother.
My grandmother was named Ida Teresa McDougald. That's where my father got his middle name, Mackey. well, his middle name was McDougal, but we all called him Mackie. And she was very tall, about 6 feet. For back in the day, that was really tall. And we thought she had a huge foot because she wore a size 9, which back in the day, women didn't wear shoes that big. She was very glamorous. We have lots of pictures of her in front of her flowers, which she loved, and her dogs. There was always a dog at her foot. I have pictures of her on the beach with her coat spread out in the winter and the dog sitting in her lap. And I guess I take after that because I love dogs and will always have one. So, but she loved to come down here. This was a quiet place for her. She wanted it quiet at the beach. So,
and she didn't like our slamming the doors. The screen doors were always slamming, and
right. So I take after her in that regard.
Okay, Joanne, let's move to the next generation. That included your mother, Anastasia, and your father, John McDougal, better known as Mackie. What do you remember about them at the beach?
Well, I remember this is the only place my father ever wanted to come because, as I said, he grew up here as a child. And so we would come down and spend the month of July, for sure. He would take that off from work. We might stay longer where he would commute back and forth to D.C. But they loved coming to the beach, and my grandmother and grandfather had 2 sons that grew up here, John McDougal and Tally Robert Holmes. Tally, my father's brother, just celebrated his 100th birthday and has talked fondly about the beach. So my father, Mackie, of course, who grew up here, loved the water, loved boating. He always had to have the fastest boat.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, as you remember.
Yes, yes.
It's nice to hear you all talk about stories of him. It just warms our heart to hear how he lets you drive the boat, yes, and help him fix things.
And participate in regattas.
Yes, right. Yes. And I've also heard from other people like Barrett Evans how Daddy influenced him even, he just didn't know the impact he had on everybody. And everybody seems to have a favorite story about Mackie.
Yes. Okay, let's move on. Linda, what do you remember most about your mom and your dad at the beach?
So I'll talk a little bit about Mom, because she was not a swimmer at all, but she was always the first person on the boat. So she, I think originally wasn't crazy about the beach, but it grew on her. And I think she really enjoyed seeing how much her family loved the beach and enjoyed the beach. So as the years went by, she became very engaged and was on the 4th of July committee and was on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And she always had a pot of baked beans for us to take to whatever potluck there was. I remember thinking, oh, Mom, another pot of baked beans. But she always had baked beans for us to bring. And I think, in listening to stories from others about her, she was always remembered as being warm and engaging and really opening her home to anyone that wanted to visit the beach. So she was quite a lady.
And the beach did grow on her because she was definitely a city girl. Mm-hmm. And coming down here back when they came, it was a little rustic. So she had a hard time adjusting, but she learned to love it.
Mm-hmm. She's a very kind woman. No doubt about that. Yes. Joanne, what are some of your fondest memories of the beach?
Well, what I love about the beach is the sense of community and how we are a village. Here, everybody knows everybody. You're kind of responsible for the children when they go out. If you see them doing something that might be harmful, then you need to step in and help. I also remember going to the pavilion in the morning to do arts and crafts, meeting up with your friends at 9 o'clock. We'd come home for lunch and then go back to the beach. We could go back and play all day until dinner time. Then you had to come home for dinner, and then you could go back out a little while longer. I remember the Tin Lizzie. My father had won in a contest, and we would probably drive that around in the evening. Linda could drive it the best. Adults would beg to use it, and they would always crash it. It was hard.
I don't know
but
why.
Linda could always drive it. I think people here have a sense of the environment and trying to preserve it, doing what we can. I think everybody recycles, just doing their part. I love the ospreys and the egrets and nature, and I don't load the jellyfish, but they're always there. You can count on them every summer. So.
Yeah, they come in July.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
they do.
Yes. And Linda, what about your fondest memories of the beach?
Well, they're very similar to Joanne's because we sort of, we have a little bit of age difference, but we're basically within the same group. So I remember going to the pavilion and movies on Saturday night with Buddy
Dr.
Dean. They were a big hit, and especially there weren't any street lights back then. So after watching, I think it was Psycho in the pavilion, and then walking home was its own adventure. Walking home with no street lights, it was fun in and of itself. But that whole experience. And one summer I even wrote a play called Cinderella at the pavilion, and all the kids in the community were my actors and actresses, and we had a production at the end of the season, and everybody came and watched the play. So it was a fun time, really fond memories.
Yes. Let's see, Joanne, what things remain as unchanged at the beach?
Well, I think mainly the sense of community has not changed. Even with the new people who have moved in, they quickly find a love for the community and want to preserve it and want to keep it as an predominantly African American community. That we all love, and where your children can be safe and you can walk around at night and not feel scared or like something might happen. It's just a very safe place. You let your kids go out and play. So I think that has stayed over all the years. We still have that sense of security, peace when you come to the beach, and love for the community and everybody in it.
You're so right.
Yeah, I think my sense of sort of what has changed also, I think that the fact that people have air conditioning, and a lot of people now have their own private pools, that has isolated us a little bit, but the Citizens Association has really worked all through the years to continue to bring people together. So we have lots of fun activities. The 4th of July this year was a huge hit with the marching band from Howard University. And we've got Labor Day events planned and golf lessons and all things to bring people together and maintain that sense of community. I've looked over, I'm a little bit of a historian and have looked over some of the old journals from the beach, and we never had complete harmony where everybody was in agreement. There's always been something going on in terms of a sense of, not all being on the same page. But with that, there's always been a sense that people wanted what was best for Highland Beach. We all have the same goal in mind. And I think with the museum, the Frederick Douglass Museum, now as part of our legacy here, it's a reminder about our history and a reminder of what traditions we have here that we have an obligation to maintain for this community, this generation, and generations to come.
That's correct. Yes, I agree 100%. Well, you answered the last question. What changes have you noticed over the years?
Yeah.
Well, this ends our interview, but it's been very, very informative. And I want to say this to you, Linda, and to you, Joanne, that thank you so much for sharing your family's rich history. I really enjoy listening to that. And also, thank you so much for sharing your fondest memories of the beach. Very much so.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Great.
much. Okay.
Thank you, Pat.
Great.
Yeah.